Today's episode is going to be a very brief and short one because we're looking at conclusions and how to write these in our analysing argument essays. So let's look at the purpose. The first thing I'll say is that it isn't essential in EAL to write a conclusion. Personally, I like students to write one, especially in the SAC, given that the weighting of the essay is 75% compared to the 25% questions, but in the exam, it definitely is not essential for EAL students to write a conclusion in their essay. The second thing is no new information needs to be included. It is much more of a summative paragraph. And remember to use it for overall comparison of both articles, or even if there are more than two articles, or the articles. You should be looking to compare them from a summative perspective. So some general tips, and the first one is look to compare those essential ideas or aspects of an article. So looking at things like contention, tone or style, audience, and general argument or general argument strategies would be things to look at and compare between the two texts in your conclusion. Now don't spend too much time on it. Your main body paragraphs are far more important because this is where you'll be doing all your analysis. So to showcase your understanding of argument and of language, your main body paragraph is really important. What the conclusion does is just allow you for a little bit more comparison and perhaps a more holistic look at the arguments and language. The last tip in your conclusion is to be really concise and direct. There's no need for you to ramble on for 5 or 6 sentences in your conclusion. Let's try and be really concise with our language and get to the point. 3 or 4 sentences max. So with our structure, I'd be looking at 3 sentences. In the first one, I'm going to look to outline key components of the first text. And again, these are things like contention, author, tone, and audience. It could be all of these, it could be some of these. My second sentence, I'm doing exactly the same thing, except this time I'm looking at text 2, and again, using my comparative connective. Now, sometimes you might end up getting 3 or 4 texts. If that's the case, you want to try and compare them all together or try and combine a few of them together. Now, with your third sentence, look for overall comparison. Maybe you might look at what both articles are intending to do or their purpose, or perhaps it could be a nice comparison with the audience and maybe the way that they try and position the audience. So let's have a look at an example conclusion. What I'd like you to do is to annotate all those key aspects of the article, so the author, the audience, the contention, and the tone. And perhaps in a different color, you might want to annotate any comparative language. So pause the video here to do that. So how did you go? Well, let's look at that first sentence. Ultimately, Tom Elliott's anecdotal evidence ensures he positions readers to view the City of Yarra and other Victorian local councils as out of touch and greedy, reinforced through a large visual. Here we have the author, I guess a bit about their tone in terms of anecdotal evidence or a strategy they've used in their writing. Readers has been outlined as an audience, which is quite broad. You could maybe be more specific with that. And then a bit of the contention, the idea that he depicts these councils as being out of touch and greedy, and a mention of the visual. Once again, you'll notice there's no comparative language there. We'll use our comparative language when we bring in the second text, which we do next. So similarly, the editorial also supports the idea that waste collection taxes are unnecessary due to the significant profits the local councils yield. So look at our comparative language. We've got similarly and also. And for the article information, we've got the text type, which is the editorial, and the contention, the fact that waste collection taxes are both unnecessary. Let's look at our third sentence now for that comparative analysis. Both authors are aggressive in their depictions of local councils in garnering support from local citizens. Here we have that comparative term both, so both authors, the idea about their tone, they're aggressive, and their audience, the fact that they're aiming their article at local citizens. Let's have a look at a second example now, and once again, I'll get you to pause here and to highlight any key aspects of the articles, as well as any comparative vocabulary. So how did you go? Let's look at the first sentence. To this end, in an assertive and straightforward tone, The Age presents a critique on the new legislation that prevents Julian Knight from receiving parole, positioning the audience against the newly introduced law. So in this sentence, we've got the tone to start with, which is assertive and straightforward. We've got the author, The Age, and because the newspaper is the author, obviously it's going to be an editorial. And then we've got our contention, the fact that it's a critique on new legislation. We also have the audience. Again, it's quite broad in mentioning the audience. Let's have a look at the second sentence now. On the other hand, while Justin Quill's opinion piece similarly lambasts the new proposed law, his article is written in a rather balanced and logical manner, and he focuses less on the legislative aspect of the issue. So the comparative terms, on the other hand, and similarly, and then we've got the author, which is Justin Quill, the text type, which is opinion piece, the contention, which is lambasts the new proposed law, and the tone, which is a balanced and logical manner. So, what are the key takeouts from today's lesson? Well, the first thing I would suggest is not to spend too much time on your conclusion. My second tip is to use it to summarize both articles. In addition to that, you should look to compare where necessary and use that comparative vocabulary. We've been through connectives before. These should well and truly be in your analysing argument toolkit. And the last one is the fact that it is not essential in the exam for EAL students. If you'd like more information on VCE English or EAL, in particularly Analysing Argument, you can have a look through the other videos. You might also want to subscribe to the YouTube channel. In addition, we've also got the 6Ps podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for more information about VCE English and EAL. We'll see you next time.